Good morning, everybody, and I am looking forward to our live chat this morning with regard to CDR. And as I said on the invite, I am Karen Lacey. I'm a former commissioner with the Commission on Dietetic Registration. I've served on the Competency Assurance Panel with CDR, and most recently have been doing all of the webinars and training for the new PDP portfolio process. So I'm here to talk a little bit this morning about CDR and the portfolio process. And I have some basic information that I'd like to share with you, but I also, excuse me, I would also invite your questions along the way so that I can be specific to any concerns that you have. So let's see, I think we have one person that's joined us, and let me just comment here as to whether or not we want to wait a little bit before other people have joined. Leah, should I continue, or do you think we should just wait a little bit? If you want to respond to me in the chat question. Let's see. Oh, it looks like there's some other people who have joined too. Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to continue here. Like I said, I'm here to answer some questions about CDR, your portfolio process. And for those of you who may or may not know, CDR is a separate entity from the Academy, and its entire purpose is, as the credentialing agency and organization, is to serve in establishing and enforcing standards for certification. And our mission and vision is really to protect the public. So by overseeing all of the continuing education, setting up the standards for those continuing education, and helping practitioners maintain their competency, we are there really to protect the public. And the Academy itself is over 100 years old. However, CDR was first initiated in 1969 with the registration, first with dietitians. And keep in mind that the Commission and the Academy are two separate entities. They're not the same. And that the Commission, CDR, serves all registered practitioners, both registered dietitians and registered dietetic technicians, whether they are members of the Academy or not. So our population that we serve is over 100,000 because that's how many credentialed practitioners we have. We have a wonderful website, and for those of you who have not yet accessed the CDR website, I really encourage you to do so, because we have information, especially now, about the new practice competencies. However, there's also information on the website that creates a database that you can go in and look for activities that are going to meet your particular kind of learning needs. And we also have a list of accredited providers, so that if you have a question about the continuing education that you might be accessing, and you want to see if they're actually an accredited provider, we can see the list of that. And then there are also a lot of assess and learn modules, as well as CPE activities, some of which are free. And there's a lot of also very important activities associated with the requirement for ethics. I'm hoping that all of you do know that ethics is a required component of your professional portfolio process, and that everyone needs at least 1 hour of continuing education associated specifically with the ethics in a 5-year period. And so there are a number of ways in which that ethics continuing education might be obtained. The other thing that's very, very important on the website is the link to PDP competencies and information. And it has the list, complete list of all of the new performance practice competencies. There's also the PDP guide that's on the website. And so the website itself has an awful lot of resource information. Another question that I frequently get when I'm doing these webinars is, how many kinds of continuing education hours do I need? And RDs need 75, including the 1 hour ethics. DTRs need 50, including the 1 hour of ethics. And the learning plan now is really facilitated by what we call a goal wizard. Excuse me. And the Goal Wizard is an online computerized tool that will allow you to go through and answer a lot of questions about what your interests are, what your current job settings are, excuse me, what kind of work that you're doing in your setting, and what you might be interested in, and or if you anticipate a change in your work site over the next 5 years. And by answering those questions online, you then are guided through a series of answers that is computer generated, in which will help you ultimately develop your goals. And in the previous process, each of us were asked to create our own goals and come up with the assessment of our learning plan. Whereas now the Goal Wizard is actually going to facilitate that for you. And if you're interested a little bit in more detail about how that Goal Wizard is, I encourage you to go online, again, to the CDR website. Check on the PDP practice competencies, and you will see a recorded webinar, most likely that I have done because I've conducted these over the last 5 years. And you can walk through the explanation of the process, how we came about this new revision, and a step-by-step process of the Goal Wizard. No, excuse me very much. Another question that we frequently get is surrounding the 120-day rule. And that is a very, very important timeline to keep in mind. The 120-day rule basically says that once you have put in your learning plan through the Goal Wizard and submitted it to CDR, you can go back 120 days prior to that submission of your learning plan and record then and log any continuing education that you have obtained within that 120-day window. Now, what that really means for you is that you want to get your learning plan in as soon as your new 5-year cycle begins as possible. Because if you wait till near the end of that 5-year time frame, and then you decide that you weren't sure exactly what you wanted to study, and you went and you took advantage of a lot of continuing education, and then you think near the end, oh, now I know exactly what my goals should be, and you complete your learning plan. And you say, and let's say you do that in years 3 or 4. However, you were taking advantage of opportunities in year 1 and 2. If that year 1 and 2 was longer than the 120 days that you had not submitted your plan, you wouldn't be able to actually count those early continuing education opportunities. So what you want to do is get that plan in right away, and you can change it because you can go in and actually modify your plan. You can update your plan very easily now with the Goal Wizard. So that is a really, really important thing. And when I do the webinars, I stress that over and over and over again. So don't miss the opportunity to take advantage of any of the continuing education credits that you might want to take advantage of. Let's see. Okay, I haven't gotten any questions. If any of you have questions, don't hesitate to write them in the chat box. And I'll keep talking about things that commonly come up and that I think you might be of interest to you, but I also want to be able to answer your questions. Another relatively recent change that is going to be happening has to do with self-studies. And I know many of you take advantage of self-studies as a way to obtain a fairly large number of continuing education hours in the convenience of your home and the ability to do it at your own time. Well, the nice thing about self-studies is just what I've said, where you can take advantage of them on your own time. You can do it in the convenience of your home, and you don't necessarily have to travel to be at a live event in person. One of the things that we were finding that would often be not as apparent in the completion of self-studies was the clear ability to critically evaluate and critically think about what the meaning of that continuing education was. And so what CDR has done, starting in any new self-study that is going to be developed starting actually January of this year, January 1, will have now a separate critical thinking tool associated with it that you as the practitioner completing that self-study will be required to submit and complete. And you will complete this critical thinking tool. You'll submit it to the provider as evidence that you have actually thought about what that learning has meant for you, how it's going to impact your practice. And so in order to get your certificate from the accredited provider now, starting with the new self-studies being developed, you'll have to submit that critical thinking tool and have answered those questions. And then you'll want to keep a copy of that for your own records in the event that you might be audited. So the critical thinking tool is a very important new part of self-studies. For those, and for all cycles starting this June 2020, you will need to be able to submit and maintain that critical thinking tool. There's also, as we're doing a live chat here today, and I must admit this is a new opportunity for me, and I'm really excited to do this. And let me share with you sort of a funny story that just happened as I was getting on before this started and working with Leah to make sure that we had the technology and that I could do it, a test, and I put forth a little promotion to say that we were going to start at 10 o'clock. Got onto Facebook and did a test, and Leah said, well, I don't see it. And so I went out again and I came back in and I did another test, and she said, oh, I see it. Well, I start getting all of these likes from my friends on my own personal Facebook, and that first promotion for this live chat went out to all of my friends on my own personal Facebook. So I had to send them a quick message saying, you know, it was a test for this live chat. So, you know, technology is fantastic, and I'm really excited to be able to do this morning. But I had a sort of a laugh at myself, and hopefully my friends will see that I'm alive and well in this time of sort of social isolation and stay-at-home policy. But I had a good laugh before all of this started. But there is a live chat also on the CDR website, in which if you have questions, you can actually go in and submit your questions, and someone in the office will be able to do a live chat. And that's really important now, because as many of us are working from home, as is the CDR staff, they can still communicate with you in a very effective way. Let's see, well, do we have any other questions here? I think I have some here. If I discontinue my CDE before my cycle ends, do I need additional CEU? That question, Peggy, has come up before, and let me see if I can clarify that question. if the CDE is one of those specialty certifications that in and of itself allows for the complete 75 continuing education hours. Now, I might also bring to your attention, Peggy, that in addition to completing the CDE, you would still need the one additional hour of ethics. Your CDE in and of itself does not also allow you to meet the 1 hour of ethics. So you would actually need, in that case, to have 76 hours, 75 with the CDE, and then the one additional hour. So if it comes up within that time, there is a window of time. You have sort of a variance in there that you can still allow for that. If your test is taken before and you take it and it's not fully within that 5-year period, I'm thinking that it's 6 months. And I've got my CDR staff person on hold here, and I'm going to ask Alyssa to verify whether or not that 6 months is the right window of time. Is that right, Alyssa? Did you hear my question, Alyssa? Whoop, she's on mute here on the side. Alyssa, did you hear that question? Oh, okay. Well, I'm hoping that she will get back to me. But there is a window of time, Peggy, so that if you take it before your cycle, is she coming on? Alyssa, are you with me? No. Okay.
Karen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So was it the 6 months, Alyssa?
Yeah, so it's the 6 months leading up to your 5-year period, and then any time within your 5-year period, you can claim that certification.
Okay, so I was correct. It's the 6 months, and then any time within that period of time. So I got the audio verification that is right. I have another question. So I hope that answers your question, Peggy. So you do have a little bit of variance there, so you don't have, because I know that sometimes those 5-year windows for those specialty certifications don't coincide exactly for that. Another question was, and thank you, Pam, the rationale for the critical thinking tool. This came about, I was on CDR and I was also serving on CAP, which is the Competency Assurance Panel. And some of the times that we would get questions about, especially the self-study, is what impact is that really having? And we really wanted to provide an opportunity for the person benefiting from the continuing education hours that were available through the self-studies to really reflect on what it is meaning. And we looked at what were the critical thinking skill components. And we've tried to, in the PDP portfolio process, now with the practice competencies, invite the practitioner who is completing the evaluation part of that to think not only what it is that a person is knowing and learning from those continuing education activities, but also how is it going to impact your practice. And we were seeing, truth be told, some of the concerns and complaints that we were getting with regard to self-studies, that we weren't sure that either not necessarily that the content was not appropriate, but sometimes the questions that were there in the evaluation piece were more knowledge-based and not necessarily focusing on how that's going to impact your practice. And because there is a lot of continuing education hours that can be obtained through a single self-study, we wanted to raise the quality and to allow the person taking advantage of those hours to really be able to think critically about that. And we know that as a profession and as a professional, one of the distinguishing characteristics that a professional has versus someone else in a particular employment opportunity or a non-professional category is that differentiation of critical thinking. So that was one of the ways that we felt that we could promote that component, especially in the self-studies. And we're sort of piloting it in the self-studies, and we may find that it is an important piece to include in all, but we felt we could at least start with the self-studies. So Pam, I hope that answers your question. And let's see, was there any other part of that that I missed? And then seems extra step, was there an input from providers? Yes, and we actually did mention that. We have at every FNCE, there is an accredited provider opportunity, and we shared that with them. And so we hope that that will allow for greater, reflection, et cetera, in that. So hopefully that isn't just going to be an extra hoop to jump through, but it's going to enhance the learning process that we have. And we'll see, because this is something new that is just being implemented. And like a lot of changes that are happening, CDR is willing, and CAP particularly is willing to take a look at that and to evaluate it as we move forward. There's another question here. What if a dietitian attends a lecture that is pertinent to my goals but has not been submitted for CEs by the organizer? Can I still submit this as part of my portfolio? If you attend a live presentation, a live lecture, that does not need to have prior approval. So that's an important. If it's a pre-recorded one or a recorded one, then that is available for your view, and that does need to have the prior approval. But if you go to a live conference, that does not need necessarily prior approval. And so you would not need the critical thinking tool for that live performance. Now, what I would hope that you would do when you submit those hours for that live presentation that you've gone to, that's going to meet your goals, that as you do that evaluation piece, that is the final step of your log, that you will consciously think about how that is impacting your practice and not necessarily just what you've learned. So that, I think, again, is a very important piece to how the competencies, the practice competencies, have gone beyond just knowledge, that they encompass knowledge, of course, but they also talk about skill, attitude, and behaviors. And as you look at those competencies, they are actually written in the form of goal statements. And that's why that goal wizard is so cool, because it allows you to generate a competency profile from which then you can choose the various ones that are going to be more specific to you in your 5-year plan. Let's see. I see, Pam, I may have misquoted here. There's a question here. It says, since it's a pilot, it shouldn't be required then. I did not necessarily mean that it is a pilot in terms of its so I misspoke there, and I didn't mean to imply that it wasn't required. So it is going to be required, and maybe what I should have said in essence was that it's a new policy for which we are willing to get feedback, but it's not a pilot as such that it's just being tested. So I may have misspoken on that, Pam, and I'm sorry to give you that misconception if that was the case. So there's another question here. How would an unemployed RD, but still maintaining registration, use the critical thinking tool? Explain how it affects my practice. Now keep in mind that this critical thinking tool is only required at this point for self-studies. And what we've asked of you is to think about how, in a case of someone not, let's say, not employed, and this is very important because you want to maintain your 75 or 50 continuing education credits to maintain your registration status, so that at a point that you do go back to work, you're qualified and ready to hit the ground running. So there are questions there that are focusing on not only what you learned, but how you think you might be able to utilize that, how it has impacted you. And were you able to reflect on it in a way that has given you meaning? And it's not so much, I don't want to make the critical thinking tool sound like it is a punitive kind of an addition. Keep in mind that its intent is for you to add another layer of reflection as to how you think that's going to impact you. And being unemployed, you may not know, but you may anticipate that if you were in this particular situation, how you might use it. And not only what you learned from it, but were you able to gain some insight into this new topic? And what would be yet some questions that you might want to think about above and beyond what you learned? Because critical thinking, keep in mind, is an opportunity for you to expand your assessment of a particular subject. So if you are critically thinking about any topic, critically thinking implies that you're not necessarily just taking that information in and accepting it as it is, but that not that it would be wrong, but that you are thinking about, okay, now I learned this in this context. What does that mean for me in this context? And what more might I need to know about this subject if I were to become even more proficient in it? So it's a way for you to add a level of self-reflection that may not always be apparent in completing a topic. And as I've worked with students a lot, because in my former day job, I was the director of 2 dietetic programs, the undergraduate program and the supervised practice at the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay. And so the critical thinking piece was probably one of the most challenging aspects to try to get students to, one, understand, and then secondly, to apply. And critical thinking is a very active, conscious way of examining a particular subject. So you say, this is what I've learned, and this is new to me. But then, what more might I need to know? Is this the essence of it? Or are there other questions that this particular subject, now that I've been exposed to, are there more questions that have been raised as a result of this? And I think going back to why CDR and CAP put this in place in the self-studies is that the self-studies are probably the most in-depth kind of opportunity we have for continuing education. We can go to live meetings, we can go to seminars, etc. But that piece, I think, can help us be a bit more reflective in that particular thing. Let's see, another question, is there evidence that we need an extra layer of reflection? Not trying to be difficult, but we are in an evidence-based profession, and we should not implement new procedures that take time and money without a solid evidence. Well, and I can appreciate your comment, Pam, and I don't know that I can specifically pull out a science-based document at my fingertips at the moment with regards to the critical thinking. But I do know for both a fact that critical thinking is important in terms of building up and adding quality to a profession. So I would hope that as this opportunity for critical thinking tool has been raised, and I'm glad that I brought this to everyone's attention and it's helping us think about it, that we would at least give it a try and to take a look at it and to see, and again, there's no police on the critical thinking tool. We're not grading it. We're not necessarily saying that you've answered the questions rightly or wrongly, but it's an opportunity and a tool, hopefully, that will allow you to think a little bit more critically about what you've done. And we designed it, I hope, in a fairly simple way, that it's not going to take a lot of time or energy, but just raise a few questions that we might not otherwise have thought about. Sometimes we hear from dietitians about webinars, presentations that seem to have a questionable presenter or content. What is the best way to address or handle this? Well, one of the things that I can say is to look at the credentials of the person who is presenting. And another thing that CDR has done to address that in some way that we felt we could without being the police is that any continuing education and again, looking at self-studies especially, that is a topic on food and nutrition for which we feel that the dietetic professional is the expert in that area. That credential person, dietitian or dietetic technician, should be in the planning process. They don't necessarily have to be the presenter, but they do have to have evidence of having been either a reviewer or a part of the developer. So what you can do as a person who is participating in that continuing education, you have a right now to ask the developer of that particular program. And if you have questions of the quality of that as to whether or not, especially if it's a diet and nutrition related subject. Now we do have, again, in the PDP guide, which is on the website, and that's so important to access, you want to make sure that it's a diet and nutrition related topic, and that someone of a credentialed nature has, RD or DTR, has actually been involved in the planning of that. They don't have to present, but you have the right to question that. Now, what we have done is we have made some exceptions with other allied health professions. So if, for instance, it's being presented from a nursing profession or a physician profession, and those exempted agencies have been listed in the PDP guide. So again, that's one of the ways that we've tried to add to the quality. When do you expect to open testing sites to take specialty exams? Thank you. I am not sure of that, Laura, and I think that is probably a question that would best need to be answered by someone within the agencies who administer those specialty exams. And I do not have any expertise or experience within that. And I don't know, we're pretty much out of our half hour here, but let me just quickly see if I can't get to Alyssa, again, my CDR expert here, and see if she is willing to answer that. Alyssa, did you hear the question that was raised by Laura? She said, when do you expect to open testing sites to take specialty exams? See if she, Alyssa's been standing in the wings in mute on her phone, so let's see if she answers here. Alyssa? Here. Yes. The question was, when do you expect to open testing sites to take specialty exams?
The testing sites is based on the testing center. Different states and sites have different opening dates.
Okay.
So I think it'd be best to contact your testing site directly to see what their plan is in place for reopening sites as states and cities begin to reopen.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm not sure if you heard that or not, but Alyssa was saying to me on my phone to contact the testing sites and to be able to see when some of those states, because as we know, a lot of that reopening is being determined specifically by the states. So that would be the way there. Well, it looks as if we've done the full half hour. And again, I really want to thank all of you for attending. I hope that I've answered some questions. I've brought to your attention some of the more recent things that are happening with CDR. And I especially appreciate the discussion and the opportunity to talk a little bit more about critically thinking, the critically thinking tool. And I hope that moving forward, that it will be seen as an enhancement, because keeping in mind, going back to our mission and vision, what we want to first and foremost do is protect the public by demonstrating that we, by having our continuing education every 5 years, are committed to quality, and the opportunity for CDR and CAP to provide tools to help in that regard is part of our mission. So again, I really want to thank all of you for this opportunity, and let me see if there's any. Does a credential like CLT become acceptable if it is associated with RDN? There are a couple questions here. I want to respond to that. That is a question that we've looked at the specialty certifications. And again, in the PDP guide, there have been some recent changes with regard to what specialty certifications are applicable to registered dietitians and those that are applicable to registered dietetic technicians. And we've also created some maximum hours that may not have been there initially. So that PDP guide is extremely important. And, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. Our own favorite attributes of the CDR site is the live chat. So I'm glad to do this. And you are welcome, to those of you who were so kind to put in your chat a thank you. And like I said, this is a new technology, and hopefully my friends saw me do the test, and now I might be willing to get online and do some more of these. So thanks so much, everybody. Stay safe, continue to be healthy, stay connected. I know this is a challenging time for all of us, but we're here for you. And I say we collectively as CDR, and I know the staff is very, very committed. So thanks again, and have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.